Good morning, good morning. It's Friday, and tomorrow I am going to a lovely bar crawl with some friends, and we're going to have such a great time. So I thought I'd spice this little video up with an extra interesting topic which has a tiny story attached to it as well. So grab your blankets and your hot cocoa and sit down, because here we go. So the thing I want to talk to you about is the actual delivery time of a given feature. Sounds sexy, doesn't it? Well, the reason why I want to talk to you about this is because in actuality, when you deliver something, what most people think they do is that they implement the feature, like they look at the specification, or if you're agile, you work forever and forever and people change their mind over and over, and you basically are done the moment that the feature is shipped. Now, what usually happens when you ship that feature and it's up in production and all of that good stuff is that your employer or your client or your product manager or product owner will chalk that down as project complete. Now, for the most part, that's the sane way of how things should be working. And if you're a consultant or something like that, that's the way the contract is going to work. However, when you work at a product company, usually things are sticking around for, at least for you in your universe, and in essence also for the consultants. It's just that they don't have to deal with the shit afterwards. It sticks around. And so the argument I will make is actually something I stole directly from one of my colleagues, and I think he made a very good point, is that a feature isn't actually done until it has to factor in the quantity of issues that are delivered with the feature. Now, for a complex feature, I mean, if you think about it, if you deliver something and it works for the common case for which you used when you were testing the implementation, then that's fine. But if you start getting a lot of bugs related to this feature, and you have to put a lot of time and investment in either refactoring or writing unit tests or anything that you basically have to do in order to ensure that the feature works correctly, that's actually time spent on the feature. Now, you chalk that down usually as bug fixing. As in Ticketmaster, that was the case, at least. We had different buckets for that. And although that may not seem like a big deal, it's actually very critical, because it indicates, it on paper, it's all the same amount of, it should all be in the same bucket. And the reason why especially this was important at my job was because we had these flagship features. You probably have used them. You have, if you've ever used the Ticketmaster website, you have probably seen some of the stuff that we've been making. And what, in essence, this entire little discussion is about is that some of the flagship features, like the new seat map and so forth, was delivered by an external team working outside of our office. And I mean, they did a really great job. I remember so well, I started my first day, and they had just implemented the first proof of concept. Now, the issue, as I identified pretty much immediately, was that that's why I was so impressed. That's like they had spent a year on delivering the seat map using React and SVGs and so forth, and I was really impressed. I thought, wow, these guys must be amazing. I mean, this is a really, really, really complicated feature. It's probably one of the most complicated things I've ever seen, or rather, conceptually. And so it was basically handed, and in essence what happened was that the guy who made it, he was promoted, and which he should have been, because it was a great initiative and they delivered it. And then they virtually said that, well, there's just a few things left, and then my team should take care of any future implementations or future development. And that's actually exactly what happened. So they delivered the feature, handed it over to us, and now the responsibility was on us to keep on delivering. And it was only when we actually got the code where we realized that there are no unit tests, there is no documentation, there is absolutely no sense of ownership in essence. They hadn't taken care of it. They had treated the project very much like a basically like a proof of concept. And that's fine, and you should be able to make a proof of concept as quickly as you humanly can. But the problem was that they had given they had delivered it in such a fashion that the business thought that this was a completely feature-rich, fully implemented thing. Now, the idea when this was delivered was that the feature should have been in full production mode, full support across the board for all the events that Ticketmaster support almost a year ago, a year and a half, and we're still building on it, we're still working on it. But the blame is now on, it's perceived to be our problem because it's been handed over to us. And that's a political issue in essence. It's not that important. But do you see, could you kind of see where I'm going? The perception is that it's been warped into having the business believe that our team is, not incompetent, but that the issue is that we don't know what we're doing, when in actuality the feature has simply been made to look as if it's completely done. And this actually brings up in my opinion, one of the hardest, most complicated things to judge in computer programming. And that is the skill of the value of the programmers who are working on the project. Why is this important? Well, because when you measure if you try to measure the value of a feature, what you usually do is that you go by how large is the project, how quickly does the developers deliver, and how much can they do with the resources that are given to them, like all of that type of stuff. But what very rarely gets judged is how many issues do you have, and this is a very important metric. How many issues do you have with the feature once it's been shipped? Does it have a lot of bugs? And then you have to always, of course, factor in how complicated is the feature. I mean, if it's really, really complicated, then most programmers will produce bugs. And this is very important because if you I've seen this so many times. I've seen, especially entrepreneurs who know absolutely nothing about programming, where they will be, and this is exactly what happened. They will be so overwhelmed with how nice something looks or how fast those guys at the IT department can deliver it, that they will complete, and for the most part, when you trade quality for speed. And what will happen is that their perception, like their metrics, which are speed and visual stimulation, is going to be the thing that dictates how well they perceive that person to work or how good that person is. And so if you then hire somebody who, like, say, one of my other colleagues they're much slower in the development, much more, like, they take longer, but they write tests, and they really think things through, and they make sure that there's a lot of knowledge sharing going on. In essence, their perceived delivery speed is much slower, but the quality of the work that they deliver is immense. It's the type of, quite literally, this person is today, now that they're shutting down the Swedish office, they are trying desperately to keep him around, because he basically, he's one of the few people who actually he's written like more than half of the code. That's the level of dedication he has to the project and the importance he has. And what I'm trying to get at here is that if you are looking at, depending on the way you look at the quality of the code that's being shipped or the delivery time of the code, his delivery speed is slower, but the amount of time needed in order to like fix bugs and issues and stuff like that it's zero. It's absolutely zero. And so when you're looking at, I'm not saying that you should always go for quality. I'm just saying that when you're thinking about the value a programmer produces at a project, you have to consider these things as well. And I know it's a difficult thing, and honestly, it's really unfair. I know that if you're a business person, you want to be able to put people into like a slot and say, oh, this person produces this. You want to be able to break things down so they fit on your spreadsheet. Unfortunately, that's extremely difficult when it comes to programming. And all I can really say is that when you're making a call, whether or not somebody's good or bad at programming or so forth, don't just look at speed and how nice something looks. Look at how many problems the feature is causing you like down the road.